T-minus 3, 2, 1, 0.
Hey folks, welcome to the Launch Sequence Podcast, last episode of the year, or for those of you listening next year, I guess it's the first episode of the year, kind of, like in the future. Like they're future people. Pretty cool. Good stuff.
Welcome. Future people.
Hello, future people.
How's the future?
Gosh, we hope it's...
Does 4.0 work yet for you?
Yeah, did Squadron 42 come out?
Yeah, Squadron 42. Just 2 years away, as last I heard, so...
Oh, thought it was 2 weeks. Yeah. Welcome to the Launch Sequence Podcast, everybody. Our weekly Star Citizen podcast, but we talk about space games in general. This week is an important one because we've got obviously the beginning and ending of two arbitrary points of time that we just decide to call different numbers, but also CIG is making some pretty big shifts between these 2 years, as evidenced by a letter from the chairman, from Chris Roberts, as evidenced by CitizenCon, as evidenced by the restructuring in the company this year. So today I'm joined by fellow friend and Star Citizen streamer and guy with, I guess, Xian hands, maybe? I don't know. Xerostate. Welcome in, man. Thank you for joining me to talk. How you doing?
Doing good. It's early for me. It's a Sunday, and normally I'm working on some house projects, so this is a welcome refreshment. So thank you.
This is, I guess I'd probably be awake by now, but normally I'd be just about waking up right now. Love a good
I usually
Sunday
can't
podcast.
sleep past about 7:30 most days. I work early during the week, so like my job is IT, and so I get up at like 5:30. So sleeping in is like 7 o'clock for me, which is just in my wildest dreams as a child, I never thought that I would be here.
Dude, that's exactly where I am.
If you'd ask me as a kid, like, hey, you're going to get up at 5:30, right? And I'd be like, no, I'm not. I'd rather die.
Yeah, that won't happen.
Here we are.
As a little kid, you laugh in their face. Ha ha, no, it won't. Yeah.
It's like I've become the thing that I despised as a child, yes.
I love my sleep, but my wife is a morning person, and I will admit it's really nice to be productive in the morning. So yeah, we tend to try and get up at least like 6:30, 7 o'clock, but 5:30 is a little too dark for me still. That just depresses me.
I have met your wife at CitizenCon, was it 2 years ago, right?
Yeah, 23.
Yeah, and it seems like an all-day person. She seems like a morning person, an afternoon person, an evening person. She's a very happy person for the most part.
Yeah, she is. A happy and productive person. Yeah, I love it. Well, dude, thank you for joining me for this early show. It's quite the time for Star Citizen 4.0's come out. Everybody's getting slightly different experiences from it. And because of that, everybody's got a little bit of a slightly different perspective of how the game is going. So today we're going to focus on the outlook for 2025, kind of what they've said about it in terms of huge restructuring and sort of the way that they're delivering updates and the goal of 2025, but also why there's so much polarization in the Star Citizen community, why the opinions about how the game is doing and what's going on are so different. Obviously, we'll have plenty of thoughts about that in the comments, guys. Let us know down below. But Zero, I think it's going to be an interesting talk.
I think so too.
Let's start by I guess just talking about like how 4.0 has been going. It's been the biggest topic of the year, really, to Star Citizen in general for quite some time. Yeah. But one of the bigger things surrounding Pyro is actually like the player safety and the actual ability for players to go in and play. Do you think that this star system gives people a good sign on where Star Citizen is going in the future when it comes to kind of player safety and stuff?
I think it offers a bit of a duality. One of the issues that everybody always had with Stanton was, a player can orbit around a station and just kind of blow people up. And station defenses aren't that great. They fire missiles sometimes. The turret, CIG put like 200 turrets at Seraphim Station. If you fly around, there's like tons of little turrets all over the place. And they're good at cleaning up derelict ships and keeping the station clear of like AI that are hostile or whatever. But they don't usually do a very good job of killing players. Players kind of just float around. And that's, it comes down to server performance and, game performance and how they program the turrets and all that kind of stuff. But it has been a pain point for a lot of players. Like every time I spawn here and I fly out, I get attacked. What do I do? And that's been a problem in Stanton. Now, granted, Stanton is kind of like a low/medium security system. So, but the idea is like the point is there's 200 turrets at Seraphim Station, and they can't handle a guy flying around in a Gladius. You know what I mean? Like, that's the conversation. The conversation isn't about like the security of the system or anything like that. The conversation is, how does CIG protect players in a place where CIG wants to protect players? And so I think that they, like, if I had to grade them, I'd give them like a C. You know, there are things that are there, and they've done, I think, maybe their best given the landscape of the servers and things. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, players don't always feel safe in a place where CIG wants them to feel safe for now. I think that in the future, obviously, we want to have like high security systems. You know, I think Terra's high security, if I remember right, and a couple other systems and stuff. So there's potential in the future for CIG to go, hey, this is a high security system. Like, if you know, kill another player, attack another player, like we're gonna drop in like nasty NPCs that you're not going to be able to handle, kind of stuff, or it's going to be really difficult for you to handle, which is what Elite Dangerous does to some marginal success. Right? I think it's called the ATR, and they, like, when you kill some, you go into a high security system or a security based system, and you kill a bunch of NPCs or like innocents, as they say. Eventually, you get dropped in on by these ATR that are faster than you, they're more powerful than you, they're tankier than you. Yeah. And I don't think they're as bad as they used to be, but it used to be like, hey, the ATR is here, we have to leave. You know, and that's a cool thing.
That is cool.
Because you get it's kind of like a smash and grab kind of deal. And I think CIG has just kind of not gotten to that place yet. So the difficulty is, how is Stanton different than Pyro, I think, maybe. And I think the idea is like the crime system is kind of in Stanton, which of course doesn't work very good in 4.0, but that's not the point. So the direction CIG is going with, like, we have a security system, we have a no security system, and they are different, and they're teaching players that those systems are different. Mm-hmm. I think that question is getting mostly answered by CIG. I don't know if it's exactly what the question was.
It is, and it's hard to make the distinction between Pyro and Stanton right now because those systems are still lacking so much, to try and make the point that it's good to have these systems. They can't even prove themselves. I was like telling my stream the other day, I'm like, but, you know, don't worry about Pyro, it's the dangerous place, stick in Stanton, blah blah blah, all this stuff. And then I jumped into Stanton, and I was in Pyro the whole day doing just fine, and I jumped into Stanton, and literally my first quantum jump in Stanton, I got interdicted and killed. Everybody is like, so Stanton, huh? Like, I've never get interdicted either, so it was such a weird, rare moment. But it just goes to show, like, you could jump into Stanton and there's still just as much thievery and villainy and wretched scum going on there, because like you said, the security is not even there. Those freaking turrets on the stations are so derpy sometimes, dude. You'll just so watch them trying to target somebody, and they're just like turning back and forth. Yeah.
I got clipped the other day. I was in Stanton, and I was at the Pyro jump gate, and I was in an Aurora, and I saw, from a distance, I saw this like size 10 turret. It was just rapid fire. I mean, it was like 600 rounds a minute firing straight at nothing. So I thought that was funny, so I flew up next to it. Turns out, I didn't know this, but I had the hostility bug where you're red all the time after doing something. And so I sidle, 5 feet away from this turret, and all of a sudden it just goes, and it's firing like 40 rounds of size 10 ammo into my cockpit before I can move. And I just die and go to prison. And then I'm stuck in prison because prison doesn't work in 4.0. And 90% of servers you can't get out of prison. So that was a rough one. I eventually found a server that let me out of prison. But things like that, like there's the derpiness, you know.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that because I've been hearing a lot about prison and just the game-breaking bugs of 4.0 right now. But going back to kind of player safety and stuff, because I think this is probably going to be... This is likely the most persistent discussion throughout this game's history, right? I mean, we have problems that they come across and they solve, things like, I don't know, land claims, whatever scandal happens that year. It comes.
Yeah, there's always 2 or 3, right?
Yeah. Even things like base building and those server meshing.
The Galaxy, bring it back. Make the Galaxy great.
All these things come and go, but I think this conversation of PvP and Star Citizen is just here to stay, and it revolves a lot around this idea of the player's safety and where should players even be expecting to play. Now, we understand from their messaging that they kind of want to have, like you said, star systems that dictate where you go for the type of gameplay you want. So you can go into a star system that's high security, that has a certain type of culture, and expect that you're not going to get attacked by players or NPCs like anytime. Do you think, though, that they should go a step further than that and do what a lot of people are asking for and put in PvP versus PvE servers?
I am a no on that one, personally. I think CIG, like you said, they want to create a game where it's one experience, but there are safer areas than others that you can reside in if that's the content you choose. I don't think that separating PvP enabled players from PvP like avoidant players is the answer for that. I think that failed a lot of players in Elite Dangerous. Even the PvE players, I think it failed them without them realizing. Because in Elite Dangerous, you can just choose the offline mode where you play by yourself, or you can choose group play.
Yeah.
Those things by themselves aren't bad, but how do you reconcile that with being able to, being able to change the world around you and have that affect other players?
Yeah.
Because like even in a PvE server, right? I take control of a station for headhunters and pyro. Okay, but another player is aligned with rough and ready, right? I mean, this is just someday in the future, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's all PvE gameplay. It's all PvE gameplay. But now the station is flipped to headhunters control and that player can't dock there anymore. That's PvP. So how do you create a system where I can't affect another player's game while still allowing me to play the game that CIG is set out to create? I don't know how you do that very well. I mean, there's probably, everybody's going to have an idea in the comments, I'm sure. But to me, I go, let's make a better game that gives you a place to go where you can play the game and be safer from that PvP side of things. Like CIG wants to do, I just want them to do that versus, artificially splitting it up in saying like this shard is PvE and this shard is PvP.
Yeah.
Because then you really, I mean, based upon what we know about what CIG wants to do with the game, with like station maybe control or reputation or rep-based hostility, all this kind of stuff, how do you're going to have to make two different games, or you're going to have to not dumb one game down, but you're going to have to mute one game's ability to change the environment. Yeah, because the PvE one can't handle that. You know what I mean? Like being able to change a station control from rough and ready to headhunters. You're going to affect another player's game. That's PvP, Because if that player is aligned with rough and ready and all of a sudden the station flips to headhunters, they're going to get shot at by that station. Mm-hmm. You have effectively PvP'd that player by using the game. That's PvP.
Changed the hostility towards them.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I know that, like I said, there's lots of things that CIG could inject into that. But at some point, like, do you want a nice, well-made turkey, for Thanksgiving or Christmas? Or do you want one that's injected with so many things it doesn't even look like a turkey anymore? And CIG wants to make that authentic turkey experience. I guess.
Thanks, CIG.
I don't know.
Chef CIG. I agree with you, though. I think
it's right at the end of the year, and I think that was my dumbest analogy that I've ever made.
It's okay. You got to get one last one in, and or at least for some people, start off 2025. Now you'll be.
Listen, all the other ones that I've made this year were so good. I had to have one bad one.
Yeah. Also make the other ones look better too. So
yeah, true.
I agree with you, though. I think like if you design a game one way and then you pivot on something that big at the last second, it's going to end up running into problems. But we're also just dirty PvPers, and we're just trying to make excuses.
Absolutely. Oh yeah, definitely.
Dude, if anybody knows the way I play this game, like that guy does a PvP. Come on.
Yeah.
He PvPs when he gets shot at and then runs.
Hey, that counts, man.
There's also things like salvage and towing ships. When you go to tow a ship with an SRV, the game recognizes that as a hostile act if you're in a place where it's deemed so.
Yeah.
And that would probably
Or if it's
be,
another player's, the other player gets a chance to charge you. How
Yeah.
do you do that in a
that would be
PvE server?
PvP.
You know?
Yeah, you would have to eliminate the ability for people to affect each other with tractor beams.
Yeah, and it would
with
be so
salvage
arbitrary. It would be
beams.
like
Yeah.
you get a notification on your screen that's like you are trying to tractor beam another player's vessel. You can't do that, and it's like, ah. I know
Yeah.
some people would be totally fine with that, but it's just such a weird thing to inject. And like I said, it's like you start to create two different games. Two different game experiences, because in one it's like, hey, there's a ship. It doesn't have its shields on. I can take it. That's it.
Mhm.
And there might be consequences, right? Like I might get a crime stat if this player gets a notification that says I'm doing a bad thing, and they charge me. And in the other side, it's like the game just stops you from doing that gameplay, and that's so strange to me.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think
You
the
can't
answer to
steal
me
this
is
ship.
yeah. I think the answer to me is no. I think the answer is no. They should make PvP servers, but I think it's important to have high security areas with very good like system security or even naval support response
Mhm.
that really, really discourages people from doing something that would like be a negative PvP experience for you. You know what I mean? Like if you want to be there, then you can be there, and the game is reasonably going to support that.
Dude, if somebody's attacking a high security station like Seraphim, like in real talk, if somebody was attacking the equivalent of Seraphim Station with essentially a military vessel,
Yep.
if we had the defenses on hand for that in real life, we would decimate them in seconds.
Oh,
And
yeah. It would
that's
be
what
like
should happen.
a magical naval railgun would pop out of the station and just
Yeah, exactly.
replace your head with a 70 kilogram block of steel. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like that's how it would work in real life. We would just like in America, most murder cases are solved. And it's like there's a reason for that, because they go after murder, like people who murder.
Definitely when they murder richer people.
Well,
We won't get
that
into
definitely, yeah. That's true. That's very true.
I do think though that they're just not anywhere near that point, and that's like the biggest thing that they're dealing with is when people get into this game and they think this is supposed to be a game where you can at least figure out what the heck's going on in the starting location. It feels like Stanton still feels like the Wild West. And I think people who are listening should realize that's how not Star Citizen we're playing. It's like you don't have any sort of confidence in Stanton, really.
Not much.
You have a little more than Pyro, but yeah, it's just like the wanting PvP servers right now, I think, is not giving the game a chance to give its solution. But it's hard to make that. It's hard to make that argument when you're 12 years.
I'm going to revise my statement a little. To the question: do you think CIG should make PvP servers?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, but only because all of them should be PvP enabled servers.
Trick question, dude. Okay, you know what I think they should do? I think this is a huge win for them. They need to just make all types of gameplay available in Arena Commander, and they've got their private servers right there. Keep doing that, and then keep adding different places from the PU into AC, and cut that off completely from the sim. So it's no money transfer, no stats, no armor, no nothing transfer. You just can go in there and practice whatever you want in an environment is closed. They get their private servers.
Okay. Yeah, and I think it would be they kind of have done that a little bit. There's some of the locations from the races and stuff.
Yeah.
And some of the ground-based locations with Star Marine.
Doctor.
Like yeah. So there's kind of a feeling there. By the way, somewhere in the United States, I know DJ Bunton just went like somebody's talking about AC. He's going to be here in the comments section.
AC.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, that's a difficult one. I think it kind of calls back to everybody, like not everybody, but a lot of people are like, is Pyro just red Stanton? And the answer is sort of yes, but I think people get it wrong. It's not because Stanton isn't dangerous enough, or it's not because Pyro isn't dangerous enough. It's because Stanton is too dangerous. Dangerous isn't the right word, but you feel the same risks in a security system that you do in a non-security system. Mm-hmm. Like the way that we've all been playing Stanton, or most of us have been playing Stanton, is a player could attack you at any time. A player could attack you at any time. We've always been parroting that same mindset because it's true. And then you go to Pyro and it's like, well, player could attack you at any time. Player could attack you at any time.
Yeah.
And so it does feel like Red Stanton, but I don't think it's a Pyro issue as much as it is a Stanton issue. I don't think Stanton security is there yet. If I'm sitting on a pad at a station, I should be reasonably feel safe. It's a station. It has turrets all over it. It's got patrols theoretically that scan you for no reason, that fly around.
Yeah.
And those people should be keeping me safe, in the vicinity of that station. And so, they just don't do that very well. And so I kind of go, I think the issue is more with Stanton than it is with Pyro. I think Pyro is kind of the vision that CIG wants for Pyro. I don't think they have to change Pyro a whole lot other than, obviously finishing some of the little things up and polish and all that stuff. But I think Stanton is where CIG, as long as they've worked on Stanton, there's more work to be done to make it feel like how they want it to feel, like a low medium security system where there's certain places you can go where you feel safe,
Agreed. Yeah. And it has become really clear. You're absolutely right. When playing in Pyro and living on this philosophy of like anybody can attack you, be very careful what you're doing. And then you go back to Stanton and you're like, okay, I'm in safety. And then you see someone and you're like, wait a second, I feel
I'm not. Yeah, I feel the same
danger.
feeling. Exactly.
Yeah. So it definitely, I think Pyro being introduced has started to, I wouldn't even say expose the problem of Stanton, but emphasize the problem we already saw, which is just that Stanton has no natural deterrence. Well, not no, but
yeah, there are some. And like I said, CIG, I think, has done their best given the landscape.
Yeah.
But it's there. You don't ever get that feeling of safety. And I know people are going to be in the comments, well, you shouldn't have a feeling of safety. It's a PvP enabled game. And you're kind of right there, but you're kind of wrong there, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, you can't. You there's got to be the gradient. I can't remember what the heck. I think there's like a movie, like a kids movie or something, that it basically makes the point that like if you don't have safety, then danger loses its point. There's always you need that contrast of like,
absolutely.
Yes, I can actually get to this place, so that the dangerous place feels like I'm going somewhere for that gameplay.
Yeah, and the I think PvPers should be on this side too, of like, you want players to have places where they feel safe for a couple of reasons. You want them to take the risks and feel and enjoy PvP. You want them to become PvPers. Give them something to be like, all right, I'm going to step outside my comfort zone. Because if there's no comfort zone that a player can be in within the game mechanics, those players will never feel the thrill of stepping outside of it because they're always in it and they're always going to hate you. You know what I mean? Instead of being like, well, man, I tried PvP for the first time and I got out of my comfort zone and I freaking love it, and now I want to try to dip into that more. I think PvPers should be more on that. Like, they should want safe spaces for players. And the other reason is, you want the maximum risk of killing another player, go into a high security system and do it. You know what I mean? You want the end game PvP content, do it there. You know what I mean? Yeah. And without those systems, you don't have that. It's just another, I'm orbiting around a station, blowing up every player I see. And that gets boring after a while. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So.
And it's like, every time you get into a conversation with folks about this, like, should you be blowing those people up? Well, of course you can. That's the point of the game. It's all possibilities. And then it's like, okay, well, you kind of, we expect you to have a reason, right? You want to steal something, or you want to hit out on somebody, some reason. It's not just a random killing. Then people are like, well, they don't stop me. I'm bored. There's not enough to do in the game. Yeah. And there's just so many reasons that people come up with for just randomly murdering folks. And I think part of that is also just folks are bored. Yeah. Yeah, they get bored with whatever experience they've had, and they go, the global chat salt or whatever, whatever it is the thing that they're like, it's kind of fun to do that and goof off or whatever and make other players upset, or just see an explosion, or just the feeling of blowing up another player's, whatever. I think lately what I've been doing in Pyro is somebody will show up to a location and I'll be like, all right. And I'll talk to chat. I'll be like, you have 30 seconds to look up this guy on RSI and see how old his account is before I blow him up. And then people in chat will be like, January 2023. I'm like, that's old enough. He knows what the deal is. December 2024. He's fine.
Yeah, all right.
We'll let him through it.
Yeah, that's pretty funny.
All right, last question on Pyro before we move on to some other stuff. Do you think that CIG made a mistake in introducing Pyro as the second system, this lawless system, as opposed to something like Magnus or Terra, which are the other two systems coming from Stanton?
I think Terra is something they want to take time with. So I don't think we'd have Terra if they chose Terra. Maybe, I don't know.
Yeah.
I know somebody in chat is currently typing, why not Nyx? I want my, what was her name? Recco back? Yeah. Recco Battaglia.
Battaglia. Yeah.
Oh, my favorite.
She's
I
good
miss
people.
you. Yes, she is. Delamar, Levski, bring it back. No, I don't think they made a mistake. I think if they did make a mistake, it's what we already talked about with not making Stanton feel like it's much safer than Pyro before Pyro came out. Or if they can do it after Pyro comes out, that's fine too. But I don't think it was a mistake. I think Pyro is a really unique and interesting system. I think it's time for CIG to start putting in the things that make Pyro feel risk versus reward different than Stanton, for instance, and then make Stanton maybe safer or something, make it feel like there's a duality between the systems. I don't think there was a problem with that, in my opinion. So, no, I kind of like it.
It is interesting seeing them put basically, at least as far as 1.0 is concerned, the beginning of the game and the end game as the first two star systems, and then kind of building in the in-betweens there. Well, I guess it's not confirmed that that's the way it is. From what I've been hearing, that's kind of how it sounds. Pyro is meant to be like the most difficult area in those first 5 systems. And it's interesting that they kind of started with the beginning and end and now can fill in the space in between and draw that.
A bit of a spoiler,
contrast.
huh, CIG? Come on.
Now we know how hard it gets. No, man. I think all pirates are waiting for the spider, which I have no idea what system that's in. You know that one?
I don't.
It's probably going to be like one of the hardest things that they've imagined up for this game to make. It's just a flotilla of a bunch of broken down spaceships.
Oh, yeah, I have heard about
together
that.
in space.
Yeah.
To make like a gigantic pirate paradise.
Yeah.
Like, okay,
yeah,
CIG.
like Grimhex 2.0.
Yeah, or 5.0.
Yeah. Speaking of Grimhex, I did notice that Grimhex not only has an armistice zone, you can get charged for crimes there, and they have turret support. So it's like, is Grimhex just another station now? I don't know what the deal is there. Or was it an accident? I don't know.
And there's no hostility there, I think, reputation hostility yet, so you can't like make it your safe space if you wanted to be.
Yeah, because I think they're, I don't know if they have an official, like, who runs it. I think it's supposed to be
Ninetales.
Ninetales, yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
So I don't know, but anyway, I thought that was an interesting tidbit. That is one way that Stanton has maybe unintentionally gotten a little safer. That Grimhex no longer seems to be the lawless zone that it was.
And actually, that's a good point. Is like you mentioned, who was it? Crap, you mentioned somebody just said there should be kind of safe spaces even in dangerous systems. Or that was you saying that, right?
Yeah.
Grimhex is kind of like the opposite, almost like a safe space for pirates in Stanton's system.
Yeah, it was like
if
the
you build
opposite.
your reputation up enough, even if you're a bad person, you would have. Well, I say bad, just go on quote. You would have a place where you could get to in Stanton because you can't jump out of that system with that criminal rating, and those kinds of things are good. But man, once again, we just see how much the systems they need to make this stuff work are lacking behind when Grimhex has just the same security as your Orison or your Seraphim station, yeah.
But I've heard arguments for years now about how it's weird that Grimhex that it exists, and it wasn't super weird that it existed when you couldn't quantum travel to it, like there wasn't a quantum marker to it, so it was kind of secretive, and it was and it felt more lawless then, and now it's like, wait, everybody can go to Stanton, even the UEE Navy.
You could just jump
and it's
in.
like, and it still exists.
Yeah.
So it's a little odd.
There's a lot of lore behind explaining why it exists, but the proximity to, I think removing that quantum beacon would help a lot. Making it a place that you kind of have to find, or maybe find the map to go access it or something like that.
There's a lot of things they could do. Like you work for Ninetales for a while, and then you're allowed, like they give you a beacon, whatever, right? And it's like you can now quantum travel here as long as you keep your reputation up with us. We're going to give you this secret information that lets you quantum travel directly here.
Yup. Yeah.
It'd be kind of cool.
That would be sick. All right. Let's talk about how people are feeling about the game. 2024 was a pretty wild year, a rough year, but also a year of movement for them and some progress. We talked about the year overall on Citizen Central last week. Pretty good stuff. But I wanted to give you a little bit more time to kind of dive into your thoughts about how the year went, if you felt like you wanted to expand any more.
Yeah, I don't know. It felt like the year went by fast. And then it felt like a lot of stuff happened right at the end. It was like 323, and then it was like 324, right? And then while that was happening, there was this kind of like 4.0, background thing, like, oh, the Evocati are kind of testing 4.0, and there's been some previews and sitcon preview and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And it just kind of felt like it snuck up on me, to be honest with you. And then all of a sudden it was like, hey, PTU's here. Hey, we're going to go live before the break. I was like, oh boy.
Yeah, like, we got 2 months, we're doing it.
Yeah. So, and I'm grateful that they did. I think, like we talked about before, I think there were some misses that, in my opinion, could have been different. But that's neither here nor there. 2024 as a whole, it's hard to quantify because there was so much talked about last year at SitCon.
There really was. What would you say from last year's SitCon? And this is really like on the spot, so I totally understand if you can't pull up the best references. But what would you say from last year's SitCon you really feel like is missing from this year's releases?
Probably some information, or like, so CIG does this thing where they'll bring out a new tech and they bring it out like one building at a time. And what I mean by that is there will be a wall, like let's say Maelstrom, right? Mm-hmm. There will be a wall that they put in outposts that's destructible, right? Just to test the tech. Okay. Mm-hmm. And they'll let us shoot it, right? And then eventually they'll start building more places out of that, destructible tech. And then they'll be like, all right, we're ready to put it on ships, right? And that process usually takes like a year or two, right? And we haven't heard almost anything about Maelstrom. I mean, there's been little tidbits here and there about like what the plan is or whatever, but we don't know if Maelstrom's really going to be what drives the armor system in Star Citizen. Also, this game has been begging for armor for 4 years. An armor system is so necessary based on all the different weapon hardpoints and sizes and types, and it's, in my opinion, the answer to all of their not all of their weapon balancing woes, but most of them. Mm-hmm. It's just a good armor system, because it's like, what's the difference between 2 size 2s and a size 4? Not much right now, because they both do similar DPS, and it's like, there could be a difference. But anyway, I think Maelstrom is the one that I'm kind of just, I've been so curious about it, and I just feel like I haven't heard a whole lot from CIG, at least not something that was like, whoa, that's, a big chunk of information. So for me, that's the kind of miss, maybe. The biggest miss is like what's going on with that. Not so much like that it's not in, or that it's not, but just what's happening with it, Where's it going to go? And so for me, that's the kind of one that I consistently think about.
It's like, if it hasn't been starting that process now, then how much longer are we going to have to wait for the process to finish?
Yeah, exactly. And it's like, maybe it is, maybe it's not, but either way, it would be really nice to have that information. So
yeah, it's also something that throws people off a lot when it comes to ships. Like, Maelstrom it would help make ships make more sense. Now, I'm not using this as a chance to plug the Intrepid, folks, okay? The ship's pretty cool, but it's not the best ship out there.
Use the Talon. They love the Talon tomato.
But like, the Intrepid benefits from having a pretty big gun on its ship that like would make more sense if Maelstrom was included. And it's things like that, and engineering, and just all kinds of systems that haven't gotten into the game that make the game a little more of a question mark. Yeah. And that seems to be one of the things that's starting to separate players more and more, is like the people who kind of know that they have these systems waiting in the background, Maelstrom, engineering, Death of a Spaceman, all those things. Yeah. And the people who have no idea that that's going to happen, and just CIG just like adding stuff and doing things without seemingly any direction.
Yeah, or they ignore it, one of the two.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, and I was one of these people where I was like, wait, so why am I flying an Intrepid if the, 100i exists or whatever, right? And the answer is, honestly, if you're going to do some combat with a starter, hopefully in the future, a size 4 is going to be pretty formidable. You know what I mean? As on a small ship. And it's like, but that argument falls on deaf ears, because we haven't really heard anything about what the armor system is going to be like, or what Maelstrom's going to do with that, or if it's really going to have anything to do with it at all. And so players just kind of go, well, there's no difference between the Intrepid and blah, 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 right? Because they don't know. And it would be nice to know.
Yeah. Do you think it would have been worth it for CIG to redo that messaging again for this exact scenario? Like, people who don't know Maelstrom, we just had it at CitizenCon 2023 if they didn't have an update, would it still have been worth them at least coming out and telling folks, hey, this is our plan, this is where we're headed?
Absolutely, I think so. Yeah, it's been a whole year since we saw them in-game engine blow up a building that was built with Maelstrom and a Gladius, right? They had a Gladius built in Maelstrom tech in, you know, their cinematic, whatever it was, in their game footage while they were showing off like the water effects and stuff, right? And it's like, we need to see that, you know, we need to kind of see, like, it's been a whole year, you know, what happened to that building? Is it still blown up? You know, did you guys put the Gladius back together so you could blow it up again? Like, it would have been cool to see like a little 2-minute or you know, little just tidbit this last sitcon to be like, hey, here's the plan has shifted a little bit and here's where it's going now.
Yeah,
you know,
a little update would have been nice.
Yeah, that would have been cool.
People are still wondering, how the heck does Maelstrom work when we have outposts that are supposed to be there for a mission? Like, can you just blow up locations? How does that respond? Like, those kinds of questions might have been good to give some updates on this year. Which I guess means
how cool would it be to take a bounty for an NPC and just drop a building on his head? You know what I mean? Like, it'd be so
any bounty,
cool.
you're just bombing the location instead of going in.
Well, maybe not bombing, but like set C4 charges, you know?
No, sir. My A2 bomb is totally worth that bounty. I'll pay for it. Yeah, I think in terms of communication, as with every year, I think CIG struggled again this year with it. Specifically, it tends to happen around the summertime when they're tightening up about CitizenCon, when it seems like probably they're getting some vacations being taken by employees during that time and like trying to work around the delays that might be coming from that. Summer just gets pretty quiet, and the Star Citizen community, we get antsy as like it is such a wild part of the year. Yeah,
we do.
How do you think they could better manage that?
I don't know. It's a tough one. I work in an enterprise and I know CIG uses Teams, and I also use Teams. And I mean, and they use other things too, but it's difficult for departments, very difficult for departments often to really communicate. A good example of this, right? There is a medical charting system. Feel free to guess what it is in the comments. But there's a medical charting system that the hospital that I work at uses, and I work in IT. And it went live without me knowing. And I work in surgical IT. I should know this. Where they do a lot of charting in surgeries. There should have been an email that went out to a distribution list that or something that let me know. And like 3 weeks into it, I had no idea, which is a good thing because that means it went well. But it's still something I should know.
Surgery techs, if you're going in for surgery, folks, and they're up to date on their software.
Yeah, they are. And it's not that I had anything to do. It's just one of those things like, I'm somebody who, in my position, I work pretty directly with like surgeons and nurses in ORs. I should know this so I can communicate any issues that might come up or things like that. And I didn't know for like 3 weeks. And so that kind of stuff happens everywhere. Every big company, this happens. How does CIG fix it? I don't know, because I don't know their systems. But I think we need to see more interdepartmental communication of like, hey, we're building this ship, like the ship team we're building a ship in this way, and here's kind of the vision for it. Because right away, the Intrepid had a size 3 on it, right? You guys remember that? Had a size 3 weapon hardpoint on it, and then it came out with a size 4 because they fixed it in PTU because people went, what?
Yeah.
and that's fine. That's totally fine to make that change. But it's also like, hey, the ship team talks to these people, player experience team, right? And they go, hey, this is how we're going to build it. You want to check it out? And they might have done that. But at the same point, it gives the opportunity for the player experience team to be like, hey, that size 3 is too small. That's not going to make sense to players. And, that should be fixed before they even see it, right?
Yeah.
And I just think a lot of times you see examples of communication kind of missing like that, and I don't know exactly the best way to fix it other than creating a culture of communication, interdepartmental communication. And that's something that is up to the management. It's absolutely up to the management to put down, create distribution lists and emails, to create groups and teams. I think they're called teams, actually. And have the right kinds of meetings and the right kinds of memos, the right kinds of communication. It's top down. It really is. And when you have good leadership, and I'm not saying they're not good leadership, but when you have leadership that is making those decisions correctly, information flows better. And then you can get that information to the teams that are, say, putting out the patch notes, or making ISCs or talking on the forums. A lot of devs come at Proxys and things like, I think it was Proxys that's been doing a lot of work over the break in the forums talking about various things.
Mm-hmm.
If those people don't have communication in an effective way from other departments and from top down, it's hard for them to answer questions that players have. And that's what they want to do, but it kind of doesn't enable them to do that. So I think that's probably the best answer that I have, is just really, you gotta lock in your communication.
Yeah.
CIG is a company that has grown so exponentially over the last, 5 years, that it's when you grow like that, you have to grow evenly. And that's the best way I can describe it from a buddy of mine who has a company that has grown from 1 person to like 50. He said, I had to grow this company evenly. I couldn't grow one arm 6 feet long because it's not going to work right, and the other arm's 2 feet long. You have to grow your company evenly. And I think that's difficult to do, especially with a company with, I don't know what the CIG staff is now, 1,200 or something like that.
Yeah.
That's difficult to do. Getting 1,200 people who are working on various projects, ship teams that are doing their own thing for months and then coming in and being like, how does this ship work in the game? With QA testers and player experience and all these kinds of other things, that's a hard thing to do. So that's my rant on communication.
Well, and they're like an R&D company almost. I mean, up until now,
a little bit.
with server meshing, PES, Gen 12, ray tracing, the DLSS stuff, like they're doing a whole bunch of stuff that is not necessarily the traditional game approach. It's kind of building a game engine. So I think that on top of the fact that they had communication problems as far as making a game, their company was also not structured to make a game. It's structured to make like a tech product. And it seems like they succeeded quite a bit in that. I would say they had some delays. They definitely had some problems throughout the years, but they have achieved something that we're seeing. The only other companies, at least at the moment, that are doing things like this are Epic and Rockstar and maybe a couple other dedicated studios. So they're doing something pretty significant. Yeah. But you're right. They have some pretty decent issues with communication. And it does sound like, for anybody who's wondering about this, I would go check out the letter from the chairman. The 2 letters from the chairman this year, I think both give insight to this. I would check out. There's a Star Citizen Live towards the beginning of this year with Richard Tyrer. There are a couple different things that they have released that show that they're kind of changing up the management, the way that they're formatting. They're moving from single focus team to multidisciplinary teams with different people from each team on one. So I think they're trying to figure that out, the problem that they have there.
Yeah,
and
they have to mesh the teams a little bit more. Get it? Mesh the teams?
Employee meshing, the goal all along.
Well, like a good example of this is like the people who made server meshing probably never, I'm not going to say they've never, but there's a good chance that they didn't think a lot about what the missions were going to do as people changed dedicated game servers, as you travel through Stanton or Pyro or whatever. And so when server meshing is here, test it out. And then a player takes a mission on server A and then travels across the shard to server B. And his mission disappears. That happened, right? Mm-hmm. Or whatever. Or you can't track it, breaks or whatever. They have to report that to IC reports. Maybe QA takes a hold of it. They test it. They reproduce it. They figure out what's going on. And then they send that information back to maybe the server meshing team to say, hey, what do we need to do to make this work here? What can we do? And work together. And there's 1,000 things, not just with server meshing, but with the whole game, where one department really has to understand their issue and talk with another department and make sure that department knows what their issue is, so that department can go, here's how we're going to fix that, and then work together to do that. So yeah, I think mingling some of the, I shouldn't say departments, but you know what I mean, mingling some of the teams together, I think would be very helpful in that. Create somebody who's multidisciplinary, that understands the ins and outs of server meshing, but also understands the ins and outs of QA or the missions or, vehicle experience or whatever, and can more accurately bridge that gap of information between those two teams and specialties.
Yeah. So 2024 wrapped up for you has been fairly quiet, with a lot of focus on the latter half, and a chance for the company to kind of show where they need to pick up their communication.
Yeah. I'm going to use the business term synergy. That's in my opinion, synergy is probably the motto of CIG for 2025. Can they create early 2025?
Mm-hmm.
Can they create synergy between their different teams, departments, etc., that lead to them going, we know what we're making,
Yeah.
and we know how to do it.
Does it feel like they've finally achieved something big? Like, does it feel like they've hit a win? I know it's like the release of 4.0 is iffy because it's not the only live going on. Like, there's still 324.
Yeah,
there
it
are
has
problems
issues,
people are experiencing. Yeah, but does it feel like CIG's finally gotten a win with this?
I think they've gotten a big PR win for the most part. I mean, obviously there's people having issues and there's people that are going to, I mean, I've been critical, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I think adding a second system is something that probably a lot of people at CIG went, there it is,
finally.
like they've been working on Pyro for a long time. And I think the real win will be them proving that they can make more systems in a shorter period of time. And I'm not trying to be like too critical, but I also think it's important to hold a game studio that tells us they have the best of the best, hold them to a high standard.
Absolutely.
Let's make a good game. Show us you can keep doing what you did and show us that pace is accelerated, and then it's the win for me. That's where I go, is like, it took them, I don't know, 4 years or whatever it is to build Pyro, probably longer than that. But the next system came in a year after that or whatever, right? 2 years after that. I don't know what, don't quote me, but
quoted. Clip.
Thanks.
Saved.
Yeah. Great. Good. But for me, I go, that's kind of where I go, is like, I want to see that the system, I want to see that I shouldn't say system. I want to see that the process is evolved. I don't necessarily, like, I know that Pyro took a long time, and I know it has its issues. It's exciting, and it's a big win for a lot of teams at CIG. The win for me is what's next, and how can you show us that what's next comes faster than what just came?
You see like an evolution of their development.
Yeah, an evolution of the process of development that shows us that you're building the dream that you want to build in a way where I'm not going to die before it happens.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm not trying to be like too sarcastic, but like I talked with somebody the other day. He's like, yeah, my wife passed a couple of years ago. She was excited about Star Citizen. He's like, I'm in my late 60s. He's like, I might not make it to release. He's like, and I'm totally serious about that. And I was like, that's a bummer.
I know several people in our own community who are in that boat.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm not trying to be like make light of it or anything like that, but at the same time, it's like, I think you can't base it around like the outliers of people. Like, people age and people go and people come and whatever. It is what it is. But I want a 20-year-old gamer, to be excited about this project as I was when I was 4, and be able to play it before he's 35.
Yeah. I think that I think you're right about this year. This year's got to be like, they need to kind of show that we have changed. I hate to say that. Like, I hate to say, they need to show they've changed, but they've done stuff like what they're doing right now before with restructuring, trying to be a little more transparent, trying to move people around to be more efficient. And those kind of worked, right? They need to show that this time is actually, we have passed a significant milestone. And I know we're saying we're changing, but really we are in a position where we need to change, right? They're going to more multidisciplinary teams and all that kind of stuff. And showing that through the updates they do, getting us back to a 4-quarterly update release, getting us to stability, proving it in the first quarter or two, I think is important.
Yeah. I think they've started the car and they put it in gear and they got to hit the gas pedal. That's all I see. And I'm not trying to say like go faster, but I think if you streamline things, we should expect things to go a little faster. We should expect to see accelerated development if you say that you're restructuring and streamlining.
Yeah. And
that's
I'm not
normal.
saying
That's normal. A normal expectation. That's not a high expectation.
It is a normal expectation, but I will say this. Remember how our expectations were at the beginning of this year.
Yeah, it's a lot of speculation.
We saw the end of their previous year, and we were like, okay, now they need to take this and do so and so and so and so with it, and then prove it out in the first 2 quarters of 2023. And they came out and they gave us half of it. So
yeah, that's true.
let's see what happens. Is my big thing. This first quarter is a very important one.
Yeah, I agree. I think seeing the plan the first quarter and following through on that plan would be such a huge win for 2025.
Yeah.
Because we see so many things at CitizenCon, and 2 years ago at CitCon, right? Chris gets up on stage and he goes, yeah. And he goes, most of what you saw here over this weekend will be in the game. And it was like, I know there was a bunch of people at CIG, like at home at their PC going like, oh my God, why?
Yeah.
Why did he say that?
Just punching their
wall. But
wall.
At the same time, like, wouldn't it be nice if he could say that and then it would happen? You know what I mean? Like, and I'm not trying to be like, oh, they're, people always, oh, they're liars, blah, 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 blah. Like, don't take such a extreme view on things. You know what I mean? I think development just happens, right? It's like the guy says a thing and then sometimes plans change. Maelstrom is obviously something happened with it where it's maybe on a back burner or the plan changed for it or something like that. It is what it is. But wouldn't it be nice if you could get to a place where, hey, our CEO can dream and we can make it happen in the time frame that he sets out? Wouldn't that be great if you could structure yourself that way? And if you could just get close to that, that would be really cool. So that'd be a huge win for 2025, I think.
Yeah. Yeah.
Show us how the sausage is made, and we still want to eat the sausage.
He helped him out this year. He kept it quiet on dates.
Yeah, he did.
Which is so funny because sometimes he'll be up on stage and he'll literally acknowledge, he'll be like, I'm not saying dates because I know you guys don't like that. And then 2 minutes later, he'll be like, yeah, but by the end of next year, you're like, so dude, good. Oh my God, Chris.
It's magnificent.
Yeah,
really.
So he swallowed the dates this year. He really only said like base building and monster hunting, I think 12 to 18 months. So besides that, devs have less pressure. They didn't set themselves up in terms of deliverables expectation for this next year. I think almost anybody is like, we don't really know what exactly is supposed to be coming next year. So they're in a better position for that to like be able to take a step back and focus more on the game stability and stuff, which...
Well, as long as somebody knows what's happening, that's somebody who can tell a team, hey, you got to do this thing, and here's when you got to do it. That person needs to know what's happening this year.
Project manager.
Yeah, project manager. That's a good word for it.
We like that. Me and Mrs. Tomato are big fans of that.
Yeah.
Let's talk about, you mentioned extreme positions.
Yes.
The polarization in Star Citizen's community is honestly, it's kind of indicative of the rest of the world topics in general. But we're obsessed with Star Citizen, and we're going to talk about it there. Yep. The feeling of 4.0 being both very, very good and also terrible and the worst thing ever is kind of reminiscent of other patches in the past and really ship releases and feature releases and CitizenCon. And why does this seem to happen with everything?
Yeah, it's interesting because in the past, like 318 is a good example of this, I think, where I think the vast majority of players, like 95% of players, would be like, yeah, 318 was that was a bad release. It was just, things went just poorly, right? No matter how, like, I had a good experience with 318, whatever, but I know it was a really bad, almost everybody would admit that.
You can acknowledge it, yeah.
With 4.0, it's so strange because it's literally like you'll talk to one person and they'll be like, dude, 4.0 is the smoothest patch I've ever played. Like CIG did such a great job. What a win for them. And they're talking about this, that, and the other thing. And then you'll talk to the next person right next to them and they will say, yeah, I haven't been able to log in since it went live. This is a failure. And it's genuinely their experience, and you can't knock them for their experience. But it's weird because in the past, like that same person might have had a really good experience in 318. Everything worked great for them. They never had a login issue for whatever reason. They never had a queue, etc. But they would be like, oh yeah, I saw a bunch of the community that had those issues. And this with 4.0, it doesn't, I just see more of not that, you get a lot of people who are doing that too. I'm not saying that they don't exist, but there's a lot of people who just kind of go, no, this is a great win for CIG. I don't see any issues with 4.0. They just don't exist. And then you'll see the other side of it, which is also, I think, wrong to a certain extent, where it's like, I've had a really negative experience, so it's the worst thing that's ever happened. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I don't know why. There are a lot of people in the middle, I think, who kind of understand both of those perspectives. But it just seems like I like our last when we were what was it called? Is the launch sequence with
Citizen
Ollie.
Central.
Citizen Central, that's the one. Sorry, I'm
Too many.
brain
So many
is
shows.
nowhere. It's too early. But on that one, like I saw your comments. I read some of the comments, which is always a mistake on YouTube, but here I am.
Yeah.
And it was literally like that. Like every other comment was just like, I'm having a terrible experience. CIG needs to do better. I'm having a perfect experience. CIG is made of gold. I have a terrible. It's back and forth, back and forth. And it's such an interesting duality that I just don't remember seeing it this aggressively, in the past.
Yeah.
So that's kind of interesting for me, the duality between those perspectives.
Yeah. I think one of the big problems is the same thing that just ruins almost everything really at this point is people let themselves kind of get emotionally attached to it, and
I can see that.
And then but also reflect the emotions they feel at that exact moment. There are people I have talked to who they'll come into the YouTube comments and they will be angry, they'll be pissed. Even if they'll be pissed at me. Like they'll have all this stuff to say. And I'm like, bro, what is this? Where are you coming from?
It doesn't make any sense because you're such an unlikable guy.
Yeah. Dude, I mean, I tell them, just send them mail, okay? It's better to just, I don't read the comments. Hate mail does better in physical form. I put it up on my wall. It reminds me. Yeah.
Yep.
But I've gotten the chance to talk to some of these people. And once you get into an actual conversation, all the nuance comes out. They're like, well, this part of the game did really well and I was really enjoying this, but then that happened, so it pissed me off and I got really angry and I came here. And you're like, okay, so you're mad because you were having fun. And you see, it's all just about people's passion and wanting to be involved. And a lot of the times you finish a really good mission and you go and you tell everybody, man, this patch is freaking great. This is awesome. I just did this. I just did that. You finish a really bad time and you go and tell everyone, this patch is terrible. Yeah. All this just happened. And it can flip,
Yeah.
And
well, I mean, it's easy to parrot your experience, I mean, and that's normal, is to tell people what your experience was. My experience in 4.0, logging in the first day, it took me 2.5 hours to get out of a hangar. And then I had a black screen. And then that account was bricked. And so I had to switch to a different account. Luckily, I had one. Mm-hmm. Imagine a new player, man. They get in their Aurora, the hangar doesn't open. Now they don't know what to do. And then it black screens and their account's bricked. Like, they're going to have a negative reaction.
Yeah.
you
I think it's worth trying to remember that. I even failed to remember that. But when seeing people's opinions about it, remembering that, like, they're probably talking about one specific thing when people say that this is all like a failure and stuff. Yeah. We're still playing the game. We're still in a server meshed environment. I'm a very positive person. I like to look at the stuff that's making me happy, but you gotta admit, like, there are definitely some big problems that are hurting this experience for a lot of people. And as somebody who's been having a lot of fun in 4.0, I've also had problems that I will gladly talk about. Yes, it's been the best experience I've had in Star Citizen so far. We took over an outpost and had a freaking great time. Yes, it's also been some of the worst glitches I've experienced, and it's okay for both those things to exist.
Yeah.
But I think people focus too much on one to, like, prove a point or to feel good,
But tomatoes, somebody is wrong on the internet.
I swear to God, man, whenever somebody is wrong on the internet, just makes me want to break my computer.
Yeah, you want to stay up till 2 a.m. arguing with them, right?
I can't stand it, man. Somebody was wrong a couple of years ago, and I still tell my parents. Just call
me
it
too.
Once in a while.
Yeah,
that guy. He still hasn't responded to me, Mom.
How dare he? No, I'm kidding. But
yeah, I think that there's just, like, people also want 4.0 to be successful.
Yeah, and it's like, it's kind of what we talked about before. Like, I think people have reasonable expectations of CIG. Some people have unreasonable expectations, but I think for, like, my reasonable expectation of CIG is, hey, when you push a patch to the quote unquote live environment, maybe a new player should be able to play it, like, and that sounds a little sarcastic, but what I mean to say is, like, okay, we talked about this before the podcast started, but, like, when CIG reduced the fuel on a bunch of ships, the quantum fuel, and it turned out that some of the starter ships couldn't leave Ruin Station in Pyro, that's not a big problem, except CIG does nothing to explain to you that when a new player goes, hey, Ruin Station, that sounds cool, I'm going to spawn there. They don't tell you that hey, just so you know, your starter ship can't leave, without like you playing, like upgrading this, that, and the other thing. Like there's no real tutorial for that about like upgrading your ship and stuff, nor is there any information given. So the CIG reverted that change, which was the right move. But that kind of stuff is like, man, didn't they say they were going to focus on the new player experience and make that better? And new players are, man, they're just, it's as confusing, more confusing maybe than ever for a new player.
Yeah, it's terrible now.
Yeah, and the tutorials do, I think, help as long as they work, of course. But at the same time, these, I don't know if game-breaking bug is the right word, but some of these game-breaking issues that affect everybody is just such a challenge for new players, such a hurdle to get over that you're going to lose these players, I think CIG still hasn't 100% learned that if you throw concept ships and straight to flyable ships in our face, a lot of people are going to buy them because they can't help themselves, which is fine. They want to support the project. But if you make a game where people keep playing it and like their experience consistently, they're going to back your game. Like they're going to keep playing. They're going to want that better ship. You're going to make more money making a positive player experience than you are. FOMO isn't the right, maybe it is the right word, but then you are getting players to buy ships. You know what I mean? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Like I can't leave Ruin Station in Aurora, so I guess I'll upgrade to a Titan. Is just such a terrible way to get more money. And I'm not saying that they did that intentionally. I'm just saying like that's just such a terrible process of thought, Yeah. Versus like, man, I really love this game and I want a little bit more out of it. I'm going to back for a Titan instead of an Aurora. I've had such a good experience that I want a ship that's got a little more oomph to it, and they do it that way,
The funding always goes up when they make progress and the game's running well.
Absolutely. Yep.
So it's, people will always say they'll just put out more ships to make more money. No, they get it. That's why we're seeing a whole bunch of these different moves, because they understand that the game needs to be playable for them to make money.
Yeah, and it comes in time. I'm not saying that it won't happen, but I think it's important to kind of keep the pressure isn't the right word. Keep the expectation on,
Absolutely.
Of like we do expect the new player experience to be a good one, and we expect it to be a good one almost every patch. You know what I mean? Consistent.
Sorry.
No, go on.
How much do you think that new player aspect affects the way that people are reacting to these things positively or negatively? Like old players maybe expecting things that CIG has talked about, new players maybe not knowing that those things are planned.
Create a new Twitch account or a YouTube account and go to any Star Citizen creators' comments or their Twitch chat or whatever, and just say, hey, I'm a new player. Should I pick up this game right now? I think that's my answer to that question. Because the reaction of, and content creators aren't the community. They aren't the whole community, But I think that they have they play the game a lot, right? They have a decent finger on the pulse of a lot of the community. You'll get creators telling you, yeah, I mean, you can pick it up, but just be aware there's going to be some nasty bugs, like it might break on you, whatever. And then you'll get creators that go, no, I don't think it's time to play right now. I think you should wait. And that's kind of indicative of the situation we're in, where it's like, don't you, like, I think a goal, and just from a creator perspective, is for the creators that play your game to be able to tell a new player, like, hey, pick it up. I think you'll have a good time, And to me, that's a bit of a finger on the pulse of the community, of like, is the community really telling their friends to play the game right now? Are your creators and YouTubers or whatever, are they really telling new players that come in and be like, hey, I play Fortnite right now. I want to play Star Citizen. Should I? And the answer right now is you should probably wait, And to me, that's kind of indicative of the situation.
Do you think the polarization that we see between the positive and negatives of the community, you think this is a good sign?
What do you mean?
Well, some people would say, oh, this is good. People are very passionate. If people are angry, that means they care about where the game is going. Other people would say the community is ripping itself apart and becoming more and more toxic.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, those perspectives are so personal,
Yeah.
For me, it's like it's so based on your own experience that I think it's really hard for people to step outside their own perspective, their own box, their own cave, if you will, and be able to have a reasonable back and forth, So for me, I don't know. I don't know if it's really indicative of. Said that word way too many times today. I don't know if it's really that telling, of the player sentiment around the development in the game. I think it's just such a personal thing.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know.
Well, let's talk about 2025 and what CIG can do stepping into it. So we got the letter from the chairman, and that has put out a decent outlook, kind of what they have planned. How did you take that letter from Chris? I mean, was it different from past letters? Do you feel like it come off differently, or just more of the same?
Yeah, I think there was a conversation somewhere that said, "Hey, you got to put out a statement if we're going to push this thing live before the break." It was the first thing he addressed, right? So it's clear that there was some messaging that needed to happen. That was like, "Hey, if we push this thing live and it goes really badly, like we don't know how it's going to go. So if it goes really badly, like we kind of need to get ahead of that a little bit." Which I think he did a pretty good job of. I think that was kind of an important message from him. We talked so much. I talked so much with so many people about the first part of that letter with like the 4.0 stuff that I don't remember all of the rest of it.
Oh, the rest of it is like the restructuring of teams to kind of get the using the experimental PTU more was kind of the big thing.
Yeah, I remember. We talked about that a little bit too. I think it's important for him to lay some of those things out. I think it's important for the CEO of Chris to, if he wants to talk to the community, to be kind of top level, right? Like address a couple specific issues and be kind of top level. But I think we need to continue to see that messaging from, people at the top of their departments, right? I mean, I don't know who's at the top of every department, but I mean, Jared on ISCs this year, it would be nice to see him pull in some people, Rich and some of these other folks that are like, hey, I'm going to explain the restructuring of, my team, right? John Crew, I'm going to explain how our team is working together with the ship teams, are working together with player experience or vehicle experience, whatever, to make a good experience more consistently. So his messaging was good, but his messaging can only be put into one letter, right?
Yeah.
And there's a whole year of messaging that we need. That can't be the thing that we consistently call back to. Hey, remember in letter from the chairman when they said they were going to be restructuring? Okay, but how are they restructuring? What, I don't want to be talking about the letter from the chairman that came out, 2 weeks ago or a week ago, whatever it was, 2 weeks ago. I don't want to be talking about that in August. I want to be talking about what John Crew said last week on ISC in August. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So for me, CIG's team leads need, and their I don't know, execs, whatever, they need to be continuing this messaging throughout the year to let us know. I think a lot of that information could come through Xylo and some of the community managers too, towards the community to say, here's how that restructuring is going. Here's how this team has shifted. Here's how that team has shifted. And I know like that's a level of transparency you don't see in a lot of game development studios. But at the same time, CIG kind of tells us they're not the average game studio. So maybe that's okay,
Yeah. I agree. They have that whole month or so in the beginning of the year where they get together and they kind of plan out the year. I think that'd be a great chance for them to take one of the teams that have restructured during that time, just smash out at Star Citizen Live in February, bring the team on and be like, this is how this team has changed. Here are some of the things that we're trying to target with that. It sounds like a pretty big restructuring. It sounds like they're going like, you're going to be working completely different sort of team stuff.
Yeah, the workflows are changing a little, yeah.
Yeah, and because they've moved so many of these people to Manchester over the last year and a half or so, I think that's also been part of it. It's like they want these people to be in close-knit strike teams physically.
They want you to be able to go from your desk down the hall to the guy's desk who you could send an email to from the US to the UK.
Yeah.
But you can talk to him and look at his screen and see what he's seeing,
Yeah.
And I think that is kind of important. As much as people say, work from home is the future, which I agree, by the way. I think work from home is great in a lot of circumstances. There is something really special about eliminating the works on my machine aspect of game development. Because if a guy from the player experience team tests something and it works on his machine, he sends an email out and says, hey, here's my results, right? And then the other guy who, from QA or whatever, who was able to reproduce the bug says, no, you did it wrong. You got to do this, this, and this. You don't want that to be in bullet points. You want him to be able to walk over to your desk and see how you reproduced it to show, and there's a difference there.
Yeah.
And so I think in some of those cases, like if that's a good example of teams working in a more fluid, synergistic way, that could be a really good thing to kind of be in the same space, to be more ingrained with each other developmentally.
Yeah.
You don't always want all your information going from this team over here to this team. If these teams were closer and like hooked together with a liaison that goes between the teams and kind of is multidisciplinary, I think that would be really, really cool.
Yeah, that seems like what they're trying to do now, which I've been talking to a couple of different devs and people in the industry over the last week or two, and it sounds like that's pretty standard. This is almost like CIG moving from a more experimental phase of development to something a little more standard in game development.
We've done something like that in our IT department at where I work. There was like 50 people in this endpoint IT department, and some of the like 4 or 5 of them would be like guys that worked on big copiers and stuff, and they knew everything about those copiers. But they've been kind of training people that come in to say, hey, you're going to touch these so that you have some experience, and then you're going to work on kind of your primary, right? So this multidisciplinary thing, and it's been pretty successful for the most part. More people can work on more things, and fixes happen faster, and you can expect a little bit more of your team when you know that your team is multifaceted, rather than I have to go talk to the printer guy, I have to go talk to the PC guy.
Yeah. That's good stuff, man. I mean, working on other projects, it's nice when everybody's got specific skills and you can cross.
Or you've touched it enough to go, hey, I think I know what's going on here. Let me just confirm that with our printer guy, the guy who's like an expert, right?
Yeah. We have not seen a lot of the behind the scenes that occurs because that's not a system that has delayed features, that has delayed updates, that has made them make promises to us that haven't gone well. One of the people I talked to laid out how the whole cargo refactor thing might have happened earlier this year when they said, yeah, this is ready to go. And you've got people who might be on the other side of the planet who checked off on some work a couple months ago and said, this works in my environment, it's good to go. They send it off, it sits there for a couple months, somebody brings it back up and says, okay, this looks pretty good, we're good to go. Sends the message up to management. And then they go and they start testing it and something changes. And it's like, these are those kinds of things that can really screw up an entire year for the Star Citizen community because just like one thing cascaded into multiple delays. So it could be good, it could be worth it, but I mean, a lot of layoffs, a lot of stories of CIG, forcing people to make decisions and all that stuff. We lost some big names there, Dan Truff and Todd Pappy. Like, do you think that you think it's going to be worth it? Do you think they could have done this in a better way?
There's always a way that you think they could have done it in a better way.
True.
But at the end of the day, I think it's a good direction, even if it's painful in the meantime. Partially because I don't know all the ins and outs, But if they're moving to multidisciplinary for a lot of their teams, that's a win, in my opinion. That is absolutely a win. You need to understand that your ship isn't the only thing that exists in the universe. How your ship interacts with the universe. Like, let's say a vehicle team is making a ship, right? And it works perfectly for them. They built it perfectly. But the cargo bay is too short or whatever, Yeah. And it's like, oh, crap. So having somebody from the player experience team or whatever team that like understands, like they take one look at it and they go, how tall is that cargo bay? Yeah, make that taller. And it's like the Intrepid we talked about earlier with the size 3 and the size 4. If somebody had looked at taken a glance at that, right, and been like, yeah, size 3 is too small, make it a size 4, and just made that decision, that might have saved PTU development, right? Because the ship came out in the PTU and people had problems with it. A lot of player feedback. It just would have saved a lot of man hours, a lot of time, to be like, hey, there's somebody that just goes, too small, make it a little bigger, done. And maybe there were people that were saying that, I don't know, but that's just an example of, people talk a lot about the Zeus CL and how they packed a lot of cargo into that thing, right? And it's like, it is kind of difficult to load that top row of cargo boxes in the CL because they're right by the ceiling. And it's like, but what if somebody during the ship development process had been like, make the cargo bay 6 inches taller? you know,
Yeah.
just do
No,
it, you
you're
know?
absolutely right, dude.
And that team would have then gone, all right, let's stretch the whole ship about 6 inches. Maybe that comes with its own problems, but it's not like it's impossible, right? It's
Yeah.
not even going to be noticeable from the outside of the ship, but from the inside of the ship, it's going to make a big difference. That's something that maybe vehicle experience and the ship team making the ship could have talked a little bit more about if they were even more ingrained than they are now. You know, I'm sure that files go back and forth and things go back and forth between those teams already. But if those teams were more ingrained, and if that's the goal of CIG, then I see that as a huge win. You know?
Yeah. Yeah. And we have tons of examples of this. You remember those little turrets they placed outside the bunkers that we still don't use? The
Oh yeah,
mounted turrets.
the
Yeah.
little Gatling turrets. Yeah,
What, like, that is the most ridiculous feature addition I think they've ever made.
yeah.
Because
They
it's
run out of
just like
ammo
those,
before you can kill one turret with them.
my
By the way,
God.
they don't
And,
even
like,
they don't even make a turret smoke, and they run out of ammo.
they put them outside of bunkers where no NPC spawn. So what were we going to use the turrets for anyways?
The NPCs do spawn outside of bunkers now,
Now
but
they
the
do.
NPCs have no direction to use those turrets.
Yeah.
Which would be cool, by the way, if an NPC like, I'm getting on the turret, I'm gonna take this guy out, and then you have to like snipe him from a distance or whatever in the head to kill him.
Yeah.
That'd be cool. But
that's the
anyway,
thing,
that's
like, now multiple years later they work. But I'm looking at the release of these turrets and I'm like, this is a feature that was worked on by just a team working on these turrets and then pushed to somebody to say, okay, put it in the game. And we just have a bunch of features like that. Like, it's great that they've built out this alpha with all these features that need to be able to run.
yeah.
Now they're switching to the point where they're like, okay, they need to work together and they need to make sense.
Yeah, and like if CIG pressed the delete button on those assets, those little turrets, and the little the little bases they sit on outside of bunkers, my gameplay would change 0%. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
it's just things like that, where it's like, yeah, there was probably some tech that for like the Cutlass Steel, because the Cutlass Steel has some of those turrets on them. The Valkyrie has some of those little turrets on them.
Mm-hmm.
There's probably some aspect of gameplay that was advanced by the creation of whatever tech is involved in those little turrets sitting on the bases or whatever. But let's get rid, they're just in the way. I want to park my ship there.
Yeah, exactly.
And so it's little things like that where it's kind of these things that get lost and forgotten, And I remember they talked in like an ISC or an SCL about they want you to be able to like place those turrets on. You remember that? Like where they were like, we want you to be able to like, these are emplacement turrets, and we want you to be able to like pack them up and like put them wherever you want, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, I don't know if that's ever going to happen. You know what I mean? So
I mean, if they were if they had the actor feature team person on the team that could be there at the same time being like, yeah, this is what we have to do to make that happen, maybe we would get better messaging on how possible it really was.
Yeah. It's just a thing that the reality of a game development like this is like, you're going to have dead ends like that, where it's like, hey, we made this little thing, we think it could go here, and then the game goes in a different direction and it's just kind of sits there, old asteroid tech. It's kind of one of those things. Various things
Cargo
like that.
decks.
Do I think I'm ever going to actually use the sink in my 325A? No.
Oh, come on.
Maybe the coffee maker, but not this. But do you think the sink is ever going to work? I don't know. They built these little sinks and
your hand if you don't use it. You sicko.
I mean, that's what hand sanitizer's for. I'll just respawn and then I'll be all clean.
Oh, okay, that's fair. Yeah, that's cool. Just destroy your body and you'll be clean. That's fine.
Crash into a planet. That's fine. But it's little things like that. Like, hey, somebody worked really hard on creating this little kitchenette and this little sink, and is the handle ever going to work to turn on the water? Probably not, But is that okay? Probably. But if you want to minimize those dead ends to things that are maybe aesthetic, not things that it's like, hey, we spent 6 months developing this thing and then the game went in a different direction. Now it's just a dead end that we wasted 6 months on. Those kinds of things, as the game progresses towards their dream, those kinds of things need to mostly be eliminated. Those situations where it's like, we spent a lot of man hours and a lot of dev time and a lot of money building this thing, and we're just going in a different direction. The game's going in a different direction. We're not going to develop that anymore. It just kind of sits there in the game. Now, I'm not saying that those little turrets at the bunkers took 6 months, but it took some people man hours to make those things and put them in the game. And they probably never had to, you know what I mean? So,
yeah, I'm very satisfied with this change, at least from what they've said of this change. It seems like this is something that will actually help with the communication problem that has been plaguing CIG for years.
Hopefully.
And hopefully, lead to some more efficient and useful features next year.
I do think it's been good to see they'll bring somebody from like vehicle experience and then somebody from like, I don't know, the server meshing team on to maybe like an SCL together or like an ISE together and have those people sit in chairs next to each other and kind of give their answers together.
Yeah, those are
so
good.
I think that's kind of those are some of the best ISEs where you hear the perspective of a dev that works on maybe the back end side of things and then one that works on the front end side of things. So I would love to see more ISEs and more SCLs where we get that kind of duality of information.
Absolutely.
And that's such a really cool thing, you know. And I hope that they do that in their development, like in on the back side of things that we don't get to see. I hope that those conversations are happening a lot, you know.
Yeah, and hopefully that multidisciplinary approach leads to that, where we have people from just different disciplines sitting together talking about what they're working on.
Yeah, John Crew needs to have lunch with Yogi every single day this year. They need to.
Yeah, John, Crew, Yogi, and I believe there's one other person. That's
there's a few. I mean, Rich,
I guess probably
maybe.
Rich probably would want to be there. Yeah. There's like there are several people that I would love to hear from sitting together that would probably like Johnny Jasivius and Torsten. Those two guys, the gameplay conversations they could probably have if they sat together would be so cool.
Yeah, really anyone but Elliot. Just lock him in a basement and tell him he can't come out until the missions work. It puts the lotion on its skin until we get 10 out of 10 again. You know what I'm saying?
You're freaking... I saw your tweet about his emote when he was like, bro, what the heck is this tweet? And you're like, yeah, we use that whenever missions don't work. It gets a lot of use. I was dying, man. Oh my God.
That's actually from either an ISC or an SCL where he did like a funny shrug of something. He was like, you know, like that. And it kind of looks like a little bit Photoshop. It was like, no, that's just like a face really, you can make,
really
Elliot.
Hardcore shrug, yeah. That was funny. That was great, man. All right, dude. I'm going to let you go. Thank you so much, though, for giving us the good introduction into 2025, expectations set, and just kind of reviewing what's going on as we enter the new year. We've got a lot to cover. I'm going to have you back on within the next couple months because I'm sure there's going to be some good stuff to talk about, dude.
Yeah, I enjoy these talks, man. This is a lot of fun. It's fun to dig in. Thank you so much
for joining me, man. I guess last thoughts. What are you like rated on a scale of 0 to is this even Star Citizen anymore? How good are you feeling about next year?
Ooh. Everybody says this every year, but really 2025 is going to be such an eye-opening year, man. The new system, the travel between those two systems, the duality of the security levels between those two systems, the gameplay in each system. I think the thing I want to see most in 2025 is I want some economy updates. Like, how does the industry player support or fuel the combat player? For just as an example, you know, and how do you dig into your profession and become an expert in it?
Yeah.
And create and live within that space in a game economy that supports it, you know?
Yeah.
That's going to be such especially with the advent of like Pyro and Stanton being so different, the ideals of them being so different. It was like, I've got combat pilots that want to keep Stanton safe, right? How do I, as a lone industry player in Pyro, support those players and make money from them doing their job, you know?
Yeah.
And I just think that that's such a cool mentality. That's like where org gameplay really starts to kick off, is how does the industry side of your org support the combat side of your org, you know? And I want to see, like, with the teams at CIG creating some synergy, it would be cool to see that kind of bleed into the game, where how do the different professions have that kind of synergy? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And we've seen some of that with like salvagers can get guns, right, for combat players or whatever, right?
Mm-hmm.
But like, how do you create those situations where you can really support each other in different ways? And that would be one of my most interesting things to see in 2025, especially with the advent of two systems.
Yeah. The interconnectivity, linking up those islands of gameplay.
Yeah, exactly. That's a great way to put it. Yeah.
Yeah. I think Rich said that like almost verbatim. That's kind of something he wants to do. And I agree. I think when you say this year is like an eye-opening year, and we say it all the time, it's actually nice this time because we usually say it because we're like, this is the year that server meshing and the new system are coming. This is the year when it's eye-opening and things change.
Yeah.
And now we don't even have to say that. It's guaranteed. We haven't had a year where it was happening, but it happened at the end of the year. So now 2025 is all of the change that we've been wanting to see over the last
they
few
opened
years.
a huge door. Like I said, they've started the car. Hit the gas pedal. Let's see where it takes us.
Yeah.
That'll be really interesting. So
don't really know where it's going from here. We'll see.
We'll see.
Let the folks know where they can find your own content and coverage of it, though.
Twitch, Xerostate on Twitch. That's it. Spelled like you might see below the, down there.
Oh, that's convenient. Look at that. Pretty nice.
Oh, it is. It's right there. Yeah.
Look at that. Wow.
I hadn't looked at the graphic yet. But yeah, so Twitch, I have made some YouTube videos that are mostly bad. But I'm on YouTube if you want to subscribe there and go nuts. I post stupid stuff on Twitter sometimes, or X. I'm going to call it Twitter until they change the name back to Twitter.
Yeah.
And then I'm going to call it X again. Yeah. So, so I'm on Twitter. I goof off there. It's mostly, junk posts, but sometimes I throw out an opinion here or there. Twitch mostly. And then I guess if I ever make another YouTube video, you'll see it there.
Cool. Yeah, I love the tweets, dude. Keep them coming. They're funny.
Yeah, thanks.
And the Twitch streams are great, and no YouTube's a bad YouTube video. So keep uploading.
I don't think you've seen very many of my YouTube videos yet, but that's okay.
Just let me go with it. All right, man. Thank you so much for joining for this talk, opening up the year. Happy New Year, everybody. Thank you as well for listening. If you guys don't want ads, our audio platform currently is supported by our supporters. And if you are a supporter, you can always join the show live. We've got our Twitch, YouTube, Patreon, and Ko-fi supporters in here watching and commenting live. So, take advantage of that if you will. Otherwise, thank you all so much.
That's been making me silently nervous to see that there's a lot of people in the chat or in the podcast room.
Judging.
Listen, yes, they're all been judging us heavily. Sorry, guys.
Thank you all, though, for joining me for this wild ride of 2024. It looks like we've got an interesting year ahead of us, and I'm happy to cover it along with all of you. So without further ado, this has been the Launch Sequence 2024. I will see you all next year.